Yeah, let's start. So, I mean, in terms of the podcast, I want to say I'm delighted today to speak to Pete Malarkey of B2B International. We've known each other a short while, not a long time, but in that time, that short time that we've known each other, I've been very impressed with the level of knowledge that Pete has in terms of B2B research and his passion for this area. And for this very reason, I wanted Pete to be the first podcast we have for the new MRS B2B network. So welcome, Pete. Really looking forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, you too, Stephen. It's been a really good few years when we've been kind of talking to one another and challenging what we know about our industry. It is a constant kind of conversation, and it's always evolving. And we'll definitely dive into some of that today.
Brilliant. Excellent. So just to kick things off, can you tell me a bit about yourself, who you've worked for? How did you get to this stage? Have you always worked in B2B research? Whole load of questions there.
Yeah, it is. It's a very simple story. I've worked for B2B International for 19 years. It is that kind of story that
Wow.
that evolves, and that kind of came about from graduating from university. I did a business and technology degree, so working in B2B research kind of made sense as I came out of university at the time. What I didn't realize is that would be the path I would kind of really go down, because I mean, for me personally, it was a case of working on the telephones to start with.
Okay,
But
because I
then
was going
from
to
that,
ask you, for those that might be interested in entering this field, what would you suggest to them? Is being a telephone interviewer, a good route into the industry?
I personally think it's the best. At B2B International, particularly, we used to have our own catty house, and that was where I started. I managed it eventually, and I've done every single job in B2B following that, from kind of the operations side through to the research and dealing with clients. But actually, starting on the telephones gives you such an amazing experience, because you're at the cold face of what a questionnaire can be and how you need to approach a target audience. And those are lessons that stick with me. And there are times when I often think back to just starting on the phones and just going, what would I want this experience to be like if I was doing that again on the phones? And you tweak a lot, you change quite a bit, you adapt, you try and make it from the perspective of an interviewer, because it isn't an easy job. It's a fun job, and it's great to talk to a variety of people. But there are those different projects where it is a tough slog. You are dialing, or you've got a list. And bearing
Yes.
in mind, this is pre-GDPR. This is kind of opening up a directory on boats and yachts, and starting at A and working your way through to Z, calling across the
Yes.
world. But
Yes.
everyone speaks English, so it always made sense. But it's a different space now. We have to really use the technology that kind of exists in the industry to
Yes.
make sure that we get what we need.
And do you think that B2B research is very different to consumer research?
Oh, I do. So I B2B is still very traditional in a lot of its approaches. So a lot of
Right.
the same kind of principles of B2C exist. But I think B2B, it's harder to kind of drift away into these really creative spaces in certain degrees. There are ways we can do that, but I think you really have to take a number of people with you. I would suggest in B2C, the decision-making process is the individual.
Yes.
Whereas in B2B, like the research that we would do, the decision-making process is made up of more and more and more people, and this continues to grow. As we did some research recently that showed that decision-making process and the decision-making team is getting bigger. The decisions are getting and taking longer to actually make. So
Interesting.
it's understanding how that then applies to a lot of the different types of research that we do. And one of the, I suppose, the joys that I have of working at B2B International is that we do all types of methodology. So I'm not here to just talk about qual. I'm not here just to talk about quant. Our only speciality is that we do B2B research, and we do every type of way to find those individuals to speak. So sometimes it might be an in-depth interview with 10, 30 different individuals of a 60-minute interview to really understand what their needs are and approach it that way. Or it could be 300, 500 online panel interviews to understand kind of the view of brands or the perception of different companies. So
Yes.
the variety we get is what keeps me here.
Right.
It is that kind of every day is a different project that we work on. And I suppose where I am now in the organization is I sit between the operations and the research team. So I have a very unique role. My role is to really understand our supplier network. And being an international organization that focuses on all methods,
Yes.
I need to know about everybody. So I need to know about companies in kind of the main locations in the world, but also these emerging markets. So we're seeing a huge boom in B2B research from large organizations in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, the continual growth of APAC, and then into Latin America, whereas 15 years ago we were still focusing on UK, France, Germany, USA, but that continues as the organizations know more about these markets and probably take a lot of technology and insights and information that they have in-house, and then how they kind of want to find new markets to move into.
Yes. So you're quite fortunate because you work in a B2B organization. It's what you do all the time. What advice would you give to others, particularly a lot of others that we see coming through now, who may do the occasional B2B project?
It is. It's something that is. I see it as a challenge. B2B is different in certain ways because the target audience is more tricky. And I'd always say spend some more time thinking about how you're actually going to really get to those people that you want to, and who those people are, and what their experience of their day-to-day is. I often get our team to really put the hat on of the kind of people we're looking to talk to. And what I mean by that is, imagine if you're a tradesperson and you want to do an online survey. And I know you do a lot of tradespeople, and you've got experience in this space as well. Mm. But their day-to-day is usually getting up quite early, going to a store to buy some products, and then they're standing in a queue. So you actually have a short space of time in the morning where you can get to these people. Yeah. They then go to site, and they're doing their job, and their job is hands-on. So you can't really get them to fill in an online survey on their phone because they're doing a job. The telephone might be a bit of an easier way because it might have a headset on. They might be able to multitask. But you've got to think about when in the day can I speak to that person, and what is the best method to actually get to them? Because at the end of their day, they're then going and seeing another job or kind of costing something up. They're then actually making orders for the next day. Finding time for research is a really challenging kind of mentality to know when that fits into to their day-to-day. And I honestly just would love organizations just to sit down and think a little bit more about how we're getting to these people, and if those people are really where we think they are. I talk about that with regards to online panel data, and we still think we can maybe speak to people in the C-suite on that method. And I really believe that they've moved away from being on online panels. I think there are more financially rewarding places that they go and find themselves in nowadays if they are at the top of their business. I think you can find that they'll be at these expert networks giving an hour of their time for a substantial amount of money, whereas they're not maybe as many of them at the kind of the £20 mark, where we're trying to get an interview with somebody and they're getting paid points to kind of do a survey. I think we have to be a bit more realistic about where people are and how we get to them. So with a number of different organizations now moving into B2B, and I can definitely see the reason for that. The B2C market is very crowded. It's a very tech-focused space. I think there's a lot more kind of experience that can really be pushed into that B2B, but it is all about taking that step back and thinking of who we're really looking to speak to.
Yes, interesting. I mean, just looking at the research industry, when I started out in this business, there were quite a number of specialist B2B companies, and they seem to have declined. I mean, I think you are one of the last few left that's dedicated to B2B. And for a lot of B2B research, it's done in organizations that do both B2C and B2B. Why do you think why do you think that's happened?
B2B is hard because actually there's two levels to B2B. There's people who think it's IT decision makers and HR decision makers, and that is quite easy to get to. Those people sit at a desk. But it's when you start to try and target people that aren't in the place where you believe they are. Goes back to the point I made earlier about think about where these people are. it means that you will more often than not face a real challenge, and it's expensive, and it's not. It's just finding the balance of how much money do I have to get the answer that I need, and in research that we do, we can put a gold platinum standard of kind of research together and find whoever you want, but that is really expensive. Usually we've got the bronze level tier of budget to work with, and we can try and work out a solution from there. We have really, it's not just about how you do the research, it's how you look at the insights and you bring this together. Because if I just give you the data for B2B research, that's not us doing our best. We've always been a full service agency because we understand that you have to hold the hand of somebody from day one all the way through to the end, and then beyond as well. There's always communication and conversations need to happen, because we might do a survey of 100 people, but actually what we're trying to do is be experts in this kind of industry. People often ask us, how could you be experts at every single industry? And we're not. We just speak to every industry, and because there are a lot of transferable skills across industries, we've now got to a point where we have spoken to, there isn't an industry we haven't researched and have experience and great case studies. But actually, it's not just about the industry. It's about, have we done a similar project with a really kind of difficult to find audience in this particular space? We have that experience that we can kind of fall back on now, and those case studies, we can really bring together the experience of how to do it properly, and how to really kind of piece together those intricate stories that come to life when you get to the boardrooms of certain companies. So to stay in the industry, we've had to be sharp. We've had to move with the times. Well, I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about what's coming down the kind of the pipeline, but it's changed from a human to human industry to being a technology industry in the last 4 or 5 years.
This really sort of brings me on to my next question, because you clearly, you spent 19 years at B2B International and gained an incredible amount of experience. But where do you see B2B research moving in the next few years? What are the key challenges for this area of research?
It's such a complex one, isn't it? Because time is the best factor for doing research. You want to sit with somebody's thoughts. Following today's podcast, I'll kind of go away and I'll say, I wish I'd said that, or I thought that this was a really interesting point. And you develop and you start to kind of have further thoughts to the idea that you put together. And I think this race to be lower cost, to be faster in terms of insights, is coming because of technology. And there are ways that we have to embrace that. We are not, we will only develop if we start to find the parts of the technology that work for us. And that can be automatically transcribing your interviews. So you've done a 25 or 45-minute telephone interview. Having to write that up as an interviewer, that was always one of the longest parts of the job. Yes. Whereas now there is AI solutions that can give you a transcript after, 30 seconds of coming off the telephone. You've automatically got what you said as a conversation, and it's split it in a research way that all the answers are there from the respondent that they said. They understand the questionnaire. There's great technology that sits behind that, which is really helpful. We use a company called HappyScribe, and they've been fantastic for us because it means that you're able to do a lot more in the background of kind of squeezing some of that time pressures. So if you come out of field on a Wednesday, actually there might still be 2 more days of write-up. Those 2 days have gone, and you've got those 2 days back of analysis, and that is a real helpful factor for us.
Yes, but what do you see as the challenges? What do you see as the sort of the potential pitfalls moving forward?
It's always, I always get us to focus on the respondent. The respondent is the person that we need to think about the most, and sadly, they're probably the person that we kind of have as an afterthought. Yes. Why does somebody want to take a research kind of a long interview that we have? What is it that makes them want to do a 10-minute online interview? Thinking about those things, and that's the challenge that we have, is making sure that the people that we need to take a survey haven't got fatigue, aren't bored of taking surveys, and it's making interviews more interesting. So that's one of the challenges that we have. How do we get more insights from shorter interviews as people's attention spans kind of really fall? We have to also think about what are the challenges that are coming down with regards to synthetic data, with data that has been created based on AI generated ideas. And I think the challenge we have in B2B is that while there's lots of people that have written about how businesses work and how things happen, that narrative changes quite a lot. And being able to synthesize data in that regard with regards to B2B, we've done a few tests at B2B International. We've looked at how can we synthesize data. We're seeing that there are big steps forward. But then we have to challenge, well, what is it built on? And I was getting the train into Manchester this morning. I was thinking about all these new skyscrapers that are going up in Manchester. And it really got me thinking about our call that we're having now and all about the foundations that things are built on. And if they're not built on the right foundations, they're going to crumble to the ground. They might look lovely from a distance, but when you get up to them, they're not quite as beautiful as you want them to be. And those foundations, and what I'm talking about here is what goes into that information. So our big challenge is how good is the information that the AI is learning from, that synthetic developers are learning from, to be true to some really complex B2B markets. So when I'm thinking here, we do a lot with industrial lubricant manufacturers. We do a lot in some really very rarely written about spaces. And I did mention earlier that there are transferable skills across different projects.
Yes.
But we're not putting any of our insights in the public domain. Our clients don't really put a lot of the information that we put in the public domain. That's their data. It's our clients' data. It's not our data. We can't kind of build an AI based on all the insights we've gathered over 25, 30 years of being in the market research industry because it's not ours. Yes. And a lot of organizations are starting to wake up to that realization of, well, what are they learning from? What is it? If you're providing some insights to an organization and it's all AI based or it's all synthetic, where has that knowledge come from? And you can look at algorithms, you can look at different numbers, and you can make things match. But I think there's still a lot of kind of crumbling foundations which you can kind of challenge, and we should be challenging at the moment. That's not to say that further down the line these ideas might kind of have that knowledge and that kind of backing and groundbreaking insights. But we still need, the biggest challenge that we have is we still need time, and we still need to be human, and we still need to have good conversations with real people who are actually out there in the industries that we need them to be, giving us the answers that we want and providing that feedback to the client. It's still the fundamentals is our biggest challenge because there's lots of disruption in the industry.
Yes. I mean, that's very, very interesting what you described. I wanted to ask you also about training and education, because for you working in a B2B environment, I imagine that any new people coming into your company will spend time with others who've got a lot more experience, and it's what you do all the time. But now that I now work on the fieldwork side, I see a lot of briefs coming to us that are really much more suited to consumer research than B2B. In other words, I want to interview 500 really senior people working in organizations, and I need it done by next Wednesday. And I think there's a big education gap that perhaps was filled in the past by various courses, MRS courses or whatever. It seems that no longer exists. How can people learn the skills moving forward?
Again, so a new favorite analogy of mine is, and I don't know about you, but if I was throwing a birthday party, I wouldn't want 300 people I sort of knew to come to my birthday party. I'd want 10 to 30 people that I really trusted to come to my birthday party. And that's B2B research, really. And it's that type of thought and thinking that if someone comes to me with this very consumer-based method, it's about explaining the reason and the rationale why that isn't the best way to go forward with it. You have to, again, challenge these briefs that come through, because if we don't, we're gonna be finding an industry where we're making big promises and not being able to fulfill them. Because actually, the first thing I always look at is how many people exist in the industry that we're trying to target. So when we see these 500 C-suite decision makers who have all got a new SaaS system in the last 2 or 3 years, you start to sit down and go, right, oh, and they're all based in Luxembourg. And that's always a wonderful curveball, is that what country are we looking at? Because a lot of the time the decision makers are coming from large population locations. And actually, once you start to kind of look at a different country, their population might be such a difference to your own, but you've just done a survey where you've spoken to 300 decision makers. But actually, if you look to, that was in Germany, where there's 85 million different individuals as a population, their number will be higher than if we talk to Luxembourg, where it's a far smaller fraction of the population. And you're not going to get the same numbers. So as soon as you explain that to a client, they usually come on board with the whole process of, okay, we can't do as many as we wanted to. Yes. Their challenge will always be, well, how do we make this robust enough? And if you've done 300 in Germany and that's been robust, then you maybe only need 30 in Luxembourg, because you can use some of the information you have from the 300 in Germany to then kind of benchmark or map your 30 in Luxembourg, as well as looking for the different nuances within that data set. You don't need as many voices in B2B as you do in B2C. You just might need to spend a little bit more time with them. And that's the other challenge we have, is that one of the things which is always going to be a challenge in B2B is when you speak to these people, you're going to have so many more questions for them because you don't actually speak to them that often. We see a lot of companies now talking about B2B panels, but it's always a challenge because I very rarely see that we're going to go back to the same individuals time and time again. We usually speak to fleet managers in the UK who have an electric vehicle 1 year, and then the next year we might move to Germany, and so that same person is never in the pool all the time. And that's always going to be a challenge for what we do. But yeah, I think that's one way of thinking about it.
The other subject I want to talk to you about, something we've discussed a lot, is data quality. Yeah. So we ran a webinar, as you know, last week. We had 75 people sign up to that, when normally we have about 20. So it's clearly a huge issue. What do you see as the challenges of data quality in B2B research?
Yeah, there's 2 sides to this. So if we look, I always try and split this atom, so to speak, by looking at the qual and the quant. The qual side of things is a really, you're going to have a human-to-human conversation, and that quality is going to be there. You're having, similar to this, we're getting really good communication going back and forth. I can see you. I can know how you're feeling to the answers to my questions. You get much more. I still think there's more we can do. We do miss those face-to-face focus groups that we used to do, which were harder to do because sadly there's less focus group venues now. And actually trying to kind of run the global projects we do in different locations, it's more of a challenge, and it's more expensive. So people have moved towards the Zoom, the Teams kind of focus place. But the quality that we get in qual is always going to be really good because you're having an open-ended comment. You can find the detail, the nuance, the experience that someone's had. You ask me up front about my experience. You're then able to know, okay, this person, fingers crossed, knows what he's talking about when it comes to B2B research. I should listen to him. Whereas sometimes we don't always have that time and space to understand the background of somebody, where they're coming from, what is their story, because part of B2B research is all about telling stories, really interesting stories, things that we can bring to the forefront of the presentations we give back. And then we have the other side. We have the quant side, the online panel side. We also have the CATI side in the quant as well. CATI interviews, I personally believe, will still be a way forward in the B2B space because telephone numbers will always exist. They're going to get a little bit harder. You might have to set up a Teams call. You might have to recruit somebody from LinkedIn to be able to then do a telephone interview, but we'll be able to find those people. The method might change slightly, but having a conversation still needs to remain, because asking a numbered question is fine, but if you want to ask a why question, you need to probe. You need to find out ways of doing this. And that is getting better in the online panel side. There are new technologies that exist. Like we use Inca Smart Probe from Orvi. There's a product that they have, Next Intelligence, and that is able to probe using AI in an online interview space. So if somebody just types in the word, it's too expensive. the AI will read that question in context with what we're after and come up with a follow-up prompt. So it would be tailored and bespoke to what we're after. So actually, we can get a little bit more in the quality space of the data once we've spoken to the person. But it goes back to my foundations, and it's what is being put into the online panel space, because it's consumers that are recruited to an online panel, and then they will find out what their job is, and that then becomes a B2B panel. We're not doing B2B panels like we did pre-pandemic. There were some really good B2B panels that were out there because the incentives really kind of resonated with the individuals.
So what's changed then? You talk about pre-pandemic. What's changed?
So the panel that really worked was one where it offered flight and airport lounge vouchers. And that was something that really resonated with B2B travelers because they could get into the lounge, and you would then alienate people that weren't traveling. They didn't kind of come into this particular pool. And then obviously people stopped traveling for business as much as they do. And the airport lounge kind of system doesn't quite ring as strong as kind of what is a B2B incentive has changed. We can talk a lot more about incentives because I think that does really resonate with the quality. But if we go back to the point about what quality is like in the kind of the B2B space at the moment, if we're looking to find a true B2B decision maker, and a lot of the briefs that we see are after some very specific types of individuals, I always use a rule of thumb. If you've got 2 quotas on a project, you can probably use an online panel successfully, B2C to B2B, however they are created, because they will be able to profile 2 quotas. And that might be country and it might be job title. If you're able to do that, absolutely fine, you can run with that. I think if you start to then add on and has to be a decision maker for, I don't know, buying footballers, it's going to be like, what? Where did that one come from? It's a lot harder to kind of really piece together. And I think we then have to go, are those people really going to be on panel, and how are they going to find them? Because there is something in the industry called fraud. There is a real challenge that we face with regards to the individuals that are in B2B especially. I'm not the first person to say this, but the incentive is higher. And therefore, the appetite to get that money is greater from people that are not the individuals that we have. And we are getting better. If we were asking this question kind of 18 months ago, I would have had a very, very negative approach to this conversation because we were kicking out something between 50 and 70% of individuals from any online survey. It was huge because we could just see that there were different things. But we've learned it's not just about our panel friends to learn how to improve. It's also about the agencies to understand how to write a better questionnaire, how to make sure we've got a lot of tricks and traps in our questionnaires to kind of get people who aren't the right people we want out of the survey. And we could talk about all the bad experiences we've had, but we're really proud of the way that we're able to remove people from our surveys. When we believe that they're not the right people in there, because you've got to look at using and partnering with different companies. So we use Research Defender up front because that gives us some kind of IP fraud detection test. A lot of other kind of platforms that they have in the background. There are other ones that different panel companies use. We can't just have one company to rule them all. Everybody wants a little bit of this. So you even have to understand what they do differently to somebody else. And then in the middle of a survey, we have to know, well, when somebody is in that survey, can we guess out? Can we find them with trip questions or trap questions?
Yes.
Are we able to ask these Inca Smart Probe Next Intelligence probes? So if somebody's just smashed the keyboard, or we know that it's coming from an AI location, we can actually use that in the next question to say, are you sure you're a computer or a person, and challenge them in the survey themselves. And then once you get to the end of a survey, that's when we still do a manual check. We're still a human process looking through, can we see the path that somebody's taken to work out the answers to our survey? All the different, we've experienced everything. Like, there isn't something we haven't experienced, and we haven't come up with either a solution or challenged the industry to try and find something to help us, because it's always going to be, if there's money there, there's fraudulent people. And I keep shouting at different companies to enforce more banking structures. It's rare that you can fraudulently create a bank account. So why can't we fix that? The reason why is it costs a lot of money, and we're not regulated. No one's going to go to prison for filling in a false survey. But I'm not saying I want them to go to prison, but it is a frustration.
That's interesting. A question we get asked a lot in our business, and it relates very much to B2B, is to do with incentives. What's your view on incentives? Do you offer them? Don't you? When do you offer them? When do you not offer them? How much? What sort of type of incentive?
So again, incentives are something that excite me and challenge me, because I think we could be a lot smarter with incentives. I think we can really start to think about, what does somebody really want? So I go back to that airport lounge. That was a great incentive for people to take part in online surveys. And also I've been challenged recently on the idea that cash is king. So we would always look to pay an incentive into, I think in B2B you have to. I think it's maybe up to a point, if you're doing a telephone interview of 10 to 15 minutes, you can possibly get away without an incentive if there is a carrot. There always has to be some carrot. So if you can't say who the client is, you can't kind of give a reason for somebody to come in and take part in a survey, then I do think you need some kind of financial remuneration for taking part. It's your time, or it just makes it easier to complete and you get a higher level of feasibility. So if we're talking about a CATI interview and it's 10 to 15 minutes, you may be able to get away with it. But if it goes past 15 minutes, and God forbid it goes past 20 minutes, because there's definitely there is a real challenge in our industry of doing an interview that is anywhere between the length of 20 minutes and 45 minutes, because it's not cost effective. It's counterintuitive. You have to pay an incentive. You have a longer write-up time. You need a more experienced moderator, and the feasibility goes down because you're asking for longer time. So all those four factors then increase the price to our clients, and it's really counterintuitive. If you can keep it below 20 minutes, you need to offer something, whether it's a synopsis of the findings, whether that's possible. Again, when we work in B2B, a lot of information that we gather isn't something that's going to go public. And so you do have to think about every project as when you start to do it. And I'm really thinking more and more about this idea of trying to target the respondents that you're looking to speak to, and seeing is there a way that you can understand who that profile of people will be before you've even spoken to them. There's lots of databases that exist out there. You must be able to find out, do they all subscribe to a particular type of newspaper? The Times, I think, is something like £36 a month. Could you offer a 3-month free subscription to the Times in the UK to people? Would that be something that would encourage somebody to take part? £96 incentive? Yes. Or if you actually, would they want the cash?
Yes.
Somebody else challenged me recently and said, actually, when you're talking to some really senior decision makers, money isn't the kind of route that they want to go down. They might actually want to gift things, and whether that's gift things to their family, and one of the ones which is really coming through are Xbox Live vouchers or PlayStation or Nintendo Switch, because they can give them to their kids.
Yes.
And it's an easy gift. You can even give them less money if you actually just give them the gift that they can give on, because for them it might be that it's a personal praise that they get of a thank you from the people they love. And I think we can tell better stories around our incentives as well. So if I was to offer you, I don't know, maybe a signed Tottenham shirt, I think you'd do probably many things to get that, wouldn't you? It's
very good. Yes,
it's just, you have to tap into the individual, and it's hard when it's kind of quite generic. But there are lots of companies out there which are trying to make this easier. So incentives in B2B, we absolutely do. The value and the range, I'm of a belief that we do need to cap this. I think, again, in the last 5 years, the emergence of the expert networks has really changed the incentive space. So if we're talking about the JLGs, the Guide Points, the Alpha sites, they offer a lot of money. And I would draw everybody's attention. There is a great Reddit thread called Expert Networks, and they have opened my eyes a great deal to the amount of money that people can make as a respondent of surveys. They will be C-suite people in some big jobs, but they're making more money in a year from doing surveys than I've seen in my entire life. It blows my mind how so many people can get so many large incentives for their time and their views.
Yes.
But yeah, it is. It's you have to have a reason. I'm talking to you for free today because I really want to give my views and about something that really matters to me. So I'm more than happy to kind of give that time. But there will be other people who'll be like, well, what's in it for me? And there is a new selfish kind of view of respondents, because there is things to be able to get. It is. It's again, a passion project of mine is how do we make it more interesting and real for respondents? And that's definitely something we can work a lot harder on.
Yes, very interesting. So as you know, last year we set up the MRS B2B network, something which our reason for being really is to help and support people in B2B research. We know that there are organizations like yourself where you're very much specialists in B2B, but as I say, there's an awful lot of other people who either have very little experience or do the occasional project in B2B that need support and help. And we're open to all types of people. What's your views about the new network? Where do you think we should be aiming our resources and dedicating our support?
I love it. I think B2B research will keep growing over definitely the next 5 years, definitely the next 10 years. And the reason I say that is because the B2C space is becoming more technology. It's becoming I believe there will be less players in the B2C market because it will become this quicker insights, faster dials being turned, feeding in and tapping into social media to give you the insights based on billions of data points of insights. So I see more companies coming and playing in the B2B space because it is harder, and because it's harder, it means it needs people. So I really do believe that is kind of a real benefit to why we have this. And I feel the other side of it is because having this experience, having these conversations, it means that people often think I'm a bit crazy because I deal with all the bids at B2B International, and when we lose a project, it hurts. But I still want to know that client has gone ahead and done the project. I want the industry to keep growing and I need it to be done well, and I need the quality to remain, because if we have a client and they go with another partner for one of the projects that they do, and they have a bad experience of how that research was done, it's going to hurt the industry.
Yes, good point.
And so if we lose a project, it's devastating. We spent a lot of time. We've really thought about this project. We really want to do it. But sometimes the client just either doesn't have the budget or likes a different approach that another organization is taking. I'm okay with that because the money is going into the industry and the insights are going into the industry. If the client decides that they don't have the budget or they don't like the approach and they don't put the money into the industry, that is the one which really irks me, because we didn't take the client on a journey to be able to get them to a point where they said, yeah, let's open up a checkbook and let's sign off on doing something here, because those are the things that we do need everybody to come on board with and understand. And hopefully I've explained that it's a challenge. It's a difficult industry. It isn't a straightforward one. There will be some sleepless nights. There will be some worries about getting field work done in time. There will be some really hard conversations to have with a client, because you have to be honest. And what I've learned in my time is you can't be a yes man. I maybe used to be a yes man, and it gets you into a lot of trouble. The best thing I ever learned is if you can see a problem, stand straight up and go straight into it, because you have to bring the client on board with you about what you're experiencing. And the more we hide behind this idea that we can speak to everybody, that's going to be a problem, because we can't speak to everybody. There are companies that shut themselves down because they are not open to people doing research on their behalf.
Yes.
There are countries that exist where it's really difficult to do research because it's a cultural structure and they want the boss's approval before they take a research piece. We have to understand all these nuances that exist in the industry to then be able to provide our client in the right direction to kind of keep stepping forward and get to a point where they're not just happy with what we're doing, but they're making really strong strategic directions based on really robust and reliable data. And that's the thing which we keep coming back to. We have people who are paying our wages to do something that they really need, and if we're not doing it properly, then that's a challenge for us.
Yes. So we're coming close to the end of this podcast, and I've got left really two key questions for you. The first question is for new people coming into this industry, people that perhaps have chosen to either exclusively do B2B research or partly do B2B research. What advice would you give them?
It's about B2B is all about a really complex mechanics of a company. And I think for me, it's all about understanding what happens in the boardroom and how decisions are made. So if you have that viewpoint, or you've had any experience, or you know anybody who are in boardrooms, talk to them about the way that conversations are happening and what are the priorities. I think last year was a really unusual year for the research industry, because I personally believe that all the boardrooms in the world were just stuck talking about what AI solution we should have, and forgot which research project should we commission. And I much prefer the latter of those conversations than the former, because things are evolving so quickly. You have to read the MRS and the kind of the Research Live functionality and words that are put out on the website are strong and really do help you build your knowledge. You are a sponge, and you just have to take on board as much water or as much knowledge as possible, because there are, as I said, those transferable skills around where you can go and excel in talking to clients in this different area, just about experiences that you've seen elsewhere. If you talk about how you're an expert, or you've had previous experience of doing something, people are like, oh, that's good. That's really good. I can take that and I can take it here.
Yes.
It's a famous phrase. Nobody got fired for buying an IBM. It might not be true as much anymore, but it definitely was a phrase I heard a lot in my early days.
Yes.
Because that means that if you just do what somebody else has done and do it better, you'll succeed. You've always got to keep expanding and keep kind of looking at what is coming down the pipeline. But if you just really care, you'll be fine.
Fantastic. Thank you. And the final question really is, what would you, of all the things we've talked about today, and you've shared an enormous amount of really useful information, what would you say is the number one key challenge for B2B research moving forward?
It's got to be the quality of what we're providing. It goes back, we've said it again, the foundations are all built on, is it a real person? Where has that insight come from? Is there experience that you can back it up with? And they then build the kind of the knowledge that you can push forward with. And if you don't trust in the data that you've got, that's always going to be a challenge to then push that forward and get somebody to make a strategic decision. So it is about data quality. It has to be about data quality, because unless you know the why, we see a lot of companies that just ask for numbers. I always need an open-ended question to verify that understanding of, well, why does that thought? Why have they given that 7? Are they just a person who doesn't score highly? We have someone in B2B, and we send internal surveys a lot to kind of get feedback on our partners. And if they give above a 3, I know that company is phenomenal out of 5, because this person doesn't give a high score. And you just have to understand your target audience and how they're playing into the numeric space. So, I think it's knowing all of those factors and having a confidence as well to deliver them.
Yes. Well, Pete, it's been an absolute privilege talking to you today. Thank you very much indeed for everything you've shared with us. We've come to the end of the podcast now, and thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Been an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it, Stephen.
Thank you. And I'll see you again soon.
See you soon.